Do you recognize this building? Of course not. This is the Broadview Developmental Center in Broadview Heights, Ohio. I only know it because my U12 soccer team practiced in front of it, and the high school marching band ended every 4th of July in front of the building's main lobby, which is located here at the northern end. I always found it odd that the lobby was so far to one side of the building, but at the time I didn't know that the other 2/3 of it was shut down and abandoned, and had been that way since the late 1980s. This isn't the kind of building that people told a lot of stories about. There were no alleged occult rituals or anything like that on the property. Sometimes someone would talk about the pink lady walking in front of windows at night, but other than that, the developmental center was just there. Not even my parents, who lived in town while it was still active, knew anything about it. A couple of my high school buddies talked about trying to get into the place and see what, if anything, was in there. But none of them actually did it. Considering the police station was on the same property less than 100 feet away, that was probably for the best. I didn't even think about it again until I visited my parents for Thanksgiving. The highways were backed up for miles, so I took a bunch of back roads and state routes, including the one that ran right past the developmental center. As I drove past the property, I saw an empty lot where the building once stood. Apparently the city decided it would be easier to tear the whole thing down and build a new one, including the part they already put time and money into renovating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something seemed off about the whole situation. When I got home after the holiday, I did a little research. And by a little research, I mean I Googled the name of the building, and immediately got directed to some GeoCities-esque website on the place. Before the city leveled the developmental center, a couple of guys managed to sneak in and snap some pictures of the abandoned part of the building. The renovated section was sealed off from the rest of the building by big sheets of plastic, behind them a place that hadn't been touched since the 1980s, save for a couple places where the asbestos had been taken out. Most of it anyway. Opened in the 1930s, the developmental center was originally a hospital for both veterans of World War II and tuberculosis patients. It was designed to be fully self-sufficient, so patients, especially the tuberculosis patients, wouldn't have to leave and risk infecting anyone. Among other places in the building, there were a massive cafeteria and mess hall, a dentist's office, a beauty shop, a non-denominational chapel, and this. I don't know why there was a throne in the main lobby, much less in the building at all. In the 60s, the developmental center was sold to the state of Ohio, which converted it into a psychiatric institute. Before you get ahead of me, there weren't any big stories about patients getting abused or people dying under care or anything like that. It just carried on until the building lost its mental care license and was abandoned so fast that almost everything was left behind. Patient rooms were intact, medical equipment and supplies, including x-ray machines with film labs and bottles upon bottles of prescription drugs, all left behind. There was even a fully equipped maternity ward, but the maternity ward was on the building's 3rd floor, where the younger patients were kept. A floor where many walls were covered in murals, possibly drawn by the kids kept there. Like the other floors, lots of things were left behind. Other than furniture and equipment, there were also art supplies, decorations, and a bunch of toys left behind, including this teddy bear. You might be wondering why I've gone on this long about some old building you've likely never heard of. I can't tell you why they left the developmental center so fast they didn't bother taking anything before boarding up the front door, but I can tell you about something else that was left in the building. Filing cabinets, filled to the brim with patient records. Whoever got in the building and snapped these pictures only posted copies of 2 of them, but this one caught my eye. In particular, look at the date and the names of the doctors. My parents told me that Mr. Stephen Bescherer, my grandfather on my mother's side, died in 1951 while serving in the Korean War. We need to talk.